It was only after martial law was finally lifted in 1987 and the island's government transitioned to democracy that a long-suppressed regional identity on Taiwan separate from the Chinese of the mainland began to finally emerge. Shortly after the island transitioned to a democratic form of governance in 1992, a poll found that just 17.6% of the island's population identified as only Taiwanese, compared with 25.5% who identified as only Chinese and another 46.4% who identified as both. But only 3 decades later, in 2020, another poll was conducted by the National Tsinghua University's Election Studies Center that found a whopping 61% of respondents identifying solely as Taiwanese, a mere 2.7% identifying as only Chinese, and 32.9% identifying as both. In general, the trend on the island is that the younger generations born after the lifting of martial law and total KMT rule in 1987 tend to identify more with Taiwan, while the older generations still tend to identify more with their Chinese identity and are more in favor of eventual reunification with the mainland. The 2 largest current political parties on the island are thus the old Kuomintang or KMT, which continues to emphasize Chinese nationalism, the current status quo, and eventual peaceful reunification with the mainland, and the Democratic Progressive Party or DPP, which very notably counter-emphasizes Taiwanese nationalism over Chinese nationalism. And while they also support the current status quo, they are much more in favor of eventual Taiwanese statehood and independence rather than reunification. The KMT won the first open presidential election in Taiwan and continued ruling until 1999, when they lost the first election to the rising DPP, resulting in DPP rule of the island from 1999 to 2008, and the first time in history since the Japanese surrendered control over the island that the KMT wasn't actually in power. The KMT won back the presidency again in 2008 and then again in 2012, ruling until 2016, during a period of fairly warm relations with mainland China. But the past 2 presidential elections in Taiwan in 2016 and again in 2020 have both led to victories for the DPP again, and the ascendancy of their candidate, Tsai Ing-wen, to the presidency, which have led to fears within Beijing that the chance at diplomacy is fading. To Beijing, the KMT is seen as the preferable party in Taiwan to have power because, at least to an extent, they remain committed to working out reunification with the mainland eventually under some terms.